Morning mist rested low over the Colorado foothills. Behind a small log cabin, Rebecca Stone knelt in the thin garden, pulling stubborn weeds from soil still cold with night. Her faded brown dress hung loose on her narrow frame, and a worn ribbon held her auburn hair in a simple braid down her back. At 23, she was young, yet worry had already settled deep in her green eyes. Inside the cabin, her father's rough cough rattled the walls. Years spent chasing gold dust through narrow claims had ruined his lungs and never once paid their debts. A tin box sat beside his bed, stuffed with letters from Denver, heavy with dates and threats Rebecca understood too well. Outside, her younger brother and sister ran barefoot across the rocks, laughing as if the world had never learned how to break people. That night, the wind shoved hard against the shutters. Rebecca sat near the low fire, mending a torn shirt while her father stared into the flames. After a long silence he spoke. His voice was thin and short of breath. He said he could no longer work the claim as he once had. The bank would not wait. Winter was coming. He told her she would need to marry a man who could provide. Someone steady, someone strong enough to carry the family through the cold months ahead. Shame trembled in his voice, but he did not take the words back. Rebecca kept her hands moving, afraid he would see them shake. She did not want to be traded for debt. She wanted love, or at least a choice. Yet when his breathing caught and fear showed in his eyes, she could not argue. Later, when the family slept, she sat alone at the rough table with a stub of candle. A borrowed book lay open before her, filled with stories of distant cities and iron railroads cutting across the land. For a little while, the words made the cabin feel wider. She imagined a life where she was more than a miner's daughter at the end of a dirt road. A firm knock shattered the quiet. It was steady, confident, as if the man outside already knew why he had come. Her father took up the old rifle and opened the door. A tall man stood on the porch, frost clinging to his dark beard, moonlight resting on his shoulders. He wore a worn leather coat and canvas trousers. Calm blue eyes looked past the rifle into the room. He stepped inside when her father moved back and removed his hat. He said his name was Caleb Walker, a mountain man who owned land higher in the range. Word of their trouble had reached him. He was not rich in gold, he said, but he had steady work, strong hands, and a place of his own. If Rebecca chose to be his wife, he would settle the worst of the Denver debts and make sure food and wood carried the family through winter. He spoke plain and slow, without charm or fine promises. The cabin fell silent. When asked what he truly wanted, Caleb answered without hesitation. He needed a partner, not a doll. The choice, he said, would be hers alone. For the next few days, Pine Ridge buzzed with whispers. After church, women murmured about the poor girl the mountain man wanted to marry. Men at the trading post watched Caleb with narrow eyes, muttering that no one came down from the high country with an offer like that unless he was hiding something. Rebecca heard it all while buying flour and salt, counting every coin twice. Caleb came by at dusk and sat on the porch rail as the sky turned deep blue. He did not press her for an answer. Instead, he spoke of the high country, of deep snow, clean water, and valleys no one from town ever saw. He talked about railroads pushing across the land, and companies hunting untouched timber. In a low voice, he said the world was changing fast, and a person could either let it crush them or learn to move with it. 2 days later, the creditors arrived from Denver. Their horses were clean, their coats neat, their voices flat and sharp. They named the amount owed and spoke of taking the claim, the cabin, even the mule. When they rode off, dust settled over the yard, and her father collapsed into his chair, broken. That night, he told Rebecca the truth he had been avoiding. Caleb's offer might be the only way to keep the family together. Without help, the children could be split up or sent away. His hands shook as he spoke, his eyes shining with fear. Later, Rebecca stood before the cracked mirror in the loft. A tired young woman stared back, jaw tight, eyes dark with sleepless nights. She was no longer a girl who could wait for kindness. At dawn, Caleb stood beside a small wagon stacked with sacks and crates. Horses breathed steam into the cold air. Rebecca's brother and sister clung to the doorway, Her father leaned against the frame, shoulders bowed. Fear pulled her back. Duty pulled her forward. She stepped down from the porch and stood before Caleb. He waited, steady and silent. She told him she would go with him as his wife. He nodded once, understanding the cost of those words, and helped her onto the wagon seat. The wheels creaked as they rolled away from the only home she had ever known. Ahead, a narrow trail climbed toward the mountains. The higher they went, the colder the air became. Pines closed in around them, like watching giants. As the town vanished behind them, a strange feeling settled over Rebecca, as if the land itself were holding its breath, waiting to reveal something about the man beside her and the life ahead. For 2 days, the trail climbed higher. The air thinned, sharp in Rebecca's lungs. Pines crowded the path, cliffs rising like stone walls. Caleb guided the horses with quiet confidence, speaking little, always watching sky and ridge. On the 3rd day, the land opened into a hidden valley. Below them lay a broad stretch of green meadow and clear river, cradled by dark timber. At its center stood a massive lodge of stone and heavy logs, porches wide, chimneys smoking. It was not the home of a poor mountain man. Caleb told her the truth. The valley was winterish. The lodge was winter house. It belonged to him. Inside, warmth and lamplight filled the rooms. Rugs softened the floors. Paintings lined the walls. Rebecca felt out of place, afraid to touch anything. When Caleb finally spoke, fear showed in his eyes. He told her his real name was Caleb Winters. His father had built a timber empire. He had hidden himself in the mountains to find a woman who could see the man, not the fortune. Rebecca listened, torn between anger and understanding. He promised that even now, the choice remained hers. She turned toward the fire, thinking of her family, the thin garden, the hard years. When she faced him again, she said she did not need a rich man, only an honest one. She would stay. Days passed, and she learned the land. She walked the mill roads, listened to workers, asked questions. Caleb listened to her. For a moment, life found its balance. Then Catherine Winters arrived, polished, cold, accompanied by men in city suits. They spoke of boards, contracts, and appearances. They said Rebecca was unsuitable, that the marriage threatened everything. That night, Rebecca listened to their arguments from the hallway. When Catherine suggested she step aside for the company's future, Rebecca stepped into the room instead. Calm, steady, she said she would not be weighed in secret. Catherine proposed a test. A governor's reception in Denver. If Rebecca could stand there without breaking, Catherine would listen. It was not kindness. It was a challenge meant to destroy her. Rebecca accepted. Denver glittered with gaslight and judgment. In the ballroom, eyes measured Rebecca in silk and diamonds. Catherine struck with sharp words, but Rebecca did not bend. When investors questioned her knowledge, she spoke of land stripped bare and families left to pay the price. The governor listened. He invited her to speak more. Her voice did not shake as she spoke of fair wages, careful logging, and leaving strong forests behind. The room shifted. When Catherine tried to challenge the marriage legally, Rebecca read the documents herself. She found the truth buried in fine print. Public service strengthened the company's standing. The governor offered her an advisory role on high country matters. With that, the challenge collapsed. Catherine retreated, defeated. Back at Winter Ridge, life changed. Cabins were rebuilt stronger. A school opened. Workers were treated fairly. Trees fell carefully and new ones were planted. The company thrived without destroying the land. On quiet evenings, Rebecca stood on the porch and listened to the wind in the pines. She remembered the thin garden, the narrow trail, the bright ballroom. She had been chosen not as a rescue, but as an equal. Together, they built a life no one could take away.